Hello there and welcome to BuzzFeed and Facebook's EU Referendum Town Hall Live. In a little under 2 weeks, the UK will go to the polls in what could well be the most important vote in a generation. Whichever way the vote goes, it will determine the future of Britain and maybe all of Europe for decades to come.
How we vote will shape our lives in hundreds of ways, large and small. From your chances of getting a job or being able to afford somewhere to live, to what it's like going on holiday, or how much a glass of wine costs. Whether we vote to remain or leave has the potential to affect them all.
And the trouble is, it's all, well, pretty confusing. We're making a decision based on predictions most of us don't understand, and that's not helped by the fact that a lot of the stuff both sides have been saying has been, what's the term, Emily?
Bollocks?
That's it, bollocks. So today we're going to try and get some straight answers from 4 of the leaders of the camps in this debate.
The audience are arriving now, and in just a few minutes we've got Armed Forces Minister Penny Mordaunt, who backs Brexit. Then at 3 o'clock, speaking for Remain, we'll have Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon.
At 4 p.m, UKIP leader Nigel Farage, who you'll be shocked to learn wants us to leave the EU. And then at 5 p.m, we'll be joined by the Prime Minister, David Cameron, a man who stakes his political future on winning the vote for Remain.
They'll all be answering questions live from our audience of ordinary voters and from you online as well. As you're watching this on Facebook, if there's a question you want answered, just ask it in the comments. We're reading them all, and we'll be putting the toughest questions to the politicians live, right here at Facebook's London headquarters.
It could be the biggest vote of our lifetimes. Let's try and make some sense of it together. Welcome to the BuzzFeed EU Referendum Town Hall Live.
Hi, I'm Tom Phillips. I work for BuzzFeed UK, and as well as deciding to invite a load of people over to our arena for a cup of tea and a little hard-hitting political debate, we thought we'd try and help make this whole referendum thing a bit more interesting. And this is the place that you'll be getting that, here at our bar, and with our exciting big screen of data and facts. Look, it works. And here on the sofa too, where we've got BuzzFeed writer and token American Hannah Jewell. Hey, Hannah.
Hey Tom, how's it going?
It's going great, thank you. And we've also got our Europe editor, Alberto Nardelli, who's here. He's very European and a proud Italian. That's right, isn't it, Alberto?
Hi, Tom. I am indeed an economic migrant, but I promise you I will do my best today.
Excellent. Now, they're here to keep an eye out for all of the bollocks that Emily and Jim were just talking about. But who are the politicians who'll be doing the talking? Well, this is a pretty big first for BuzzFeed and Facebook, this whole live town hall idea. So we thought we'd aim high. Here's who we've got coming up.
So, that's what you're in for over the next 4 hours. That's right, 4 entire thrilling hours. We're all going to make it through it together, guys. Anyway, first we're going to talk to our Europe editor, Alberto Nardelli, for a bit, because so far the Brexit debate has frankly been full of wild and terrifying claims that all sound like lies anyway, about the end of the world. So, Alberto, can you tell us in a non-boring way what the main issues are around this referendum?
Well, the debate so far has really been dominated by 2 themes, the economy and immigration. There are other debates around these, like sovereignty or security, but ultimately the Remain side wants people to think about the economy, Leave wants people to focus on immigration.
Okay, well, since Penny Mordaunt was apparently named for the HMS Penelope, let's talk about security a bit. What are we talking about when we talk about security as it relates to the referendum?
Well, the truth is that when we think about the types of topics that we normally associate with security, say intelligence or defense policy, many of these areas are beyond the scope of the European Union. The EU is more about toasters than it's about tanks. However, the Leave side would argue that issues like immigration or controlling our borders, they relate to security too at the end of the day.
So I know that Penny Mordaunt has been criticized for the way that she's talked about Turkey and said that the UK wouldn't have a veto over Turkey's membership in the European Union in the future. Is that true?
It's not true, actually. So every
Penny, come on.
every time a new country is set to join the European Union, all the countries which are current members of the European Union have to agree. And this means that even if one country doesn't agree, that new potential member will not be joining the EU.
So is the reason that someone would talk about Turkey in this context because Turkey borders Syria and they're trying to possibly play upon fears about, you know, ISIS fighters are going to come streaming into the UK and move into your living room and befriend your children? Is that what the fear is?
Well, I would think about this. Historically, the British government's position towards Turkey has been favourable for European EU membership, including, by the way, Boris Johnson. He in the past has spoken about Turkey joining the EU.
What changed his mind then?
Well, I think the current campaign, most probably, it's really Turkey, the debate isn't really about Turkey joining the EU. Turkey is just a proxy to talk about immigration. The Leave campaign wants people to focus on immigration, and Turkey is just one channel for them to do that through.
Okay, well, what are the polls looking like right now? I've not really been paying attention. Who's in the lead?
Bloody confusing.
Okay.
So if you look at an average, Remain is just ahead, but the problem is that telephone polling shows Remain ahead by quite a bit, while online polls show that Leave is ahead by a little bit, and so the truth is we don't know which of those two methods is more accurate. So we don't really know what's going on.
Which method do you think is more accurate?
I have no idea is the honest answer. What I do know is at the general election, they were both wrong.
Yeah, are we going to have the rug pulled out from underneath us the way we did in the general election?
Hopefully not.
We'll find out, won't we? All right, well, thanks, Alberto. You're a star. That was not boring.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So we're just a few seconds away from our first town hall with Armed Forces Minister Penny Mordaunt facing our live audience's questions. Those of you watching online can join in too, of course. If you've got a question, just drop it in the comments and we'll be putting the best of those to Penny Mordaunt and the other politicians. So we're going over now to the arena where we're joining BuzzFeed UK's Emily Ashton and Jim Waterson with the politicians.
Hello and welcome to the arena. I'm Emily Ashton.
And I'm Jim Waterson. We're joined by an audience of BuzzFeed readers who have all come bursting with questions for the first of our live EU referendum town halls.
Now, in a moment, we'll be joined by Penny Mordaunt, representing the Leave vote. While you're watching, let us know whether you agree or not with what she has to say. Show us how you feel by using the love or the angry reactions on Facebook. And keep an eye out for our reaction tracker at the bottom of the screen during the show.
Tell us what you'd like to ask her by posting your questions here on BuzzFeed's Facebook page as a comment, and our own Remy Patel will select some to ask Penny Mordaunt during the next 40 minutes.
So now, to make the case for Britain leaving the EU, will you please welcome the Minister of State for the Armed Forces, Penny Mordaunt.
Why does democracy matter? What happens when those who make our laws and spend our money are not accountable to us? And how did such a valued principle become so fragile and controversial? This referendum is about us taking back control of our borders, our laws and our money, and getting the freedom we need to trade and cooperate with the whole world. What matters to us and to our European partners will endure. And what harms us, our security and our prosperity, can be changed. We've tried to reform the EU from within, And there's one course of action open to us now to give us what we need to thrive and Europe the hope it needs to reform. And we can do it. We are a great nation and a great country, and our future should be in our hands. Take back control and vote leave.
Thank you very much, Penny. Now we're going to go straight to our next question, which is over here, and it's from Jasmine Bosley, who's a student from Milton Keynes. Jasmine, what's your question?
What's it like to serve in a government where you're openly campaigning against the official position of that government?
Well, I think it is really important that we've got this referendum. Probably, certainly in my lifetime, perhaps in your lifetime, there will never be a more important decision that we will take to shape the future of our country. So yes, it's a bit tough, but it's absolutely right that we do it. And I think we should be proud that we are putting this to the people of this country. The Prime Minister has given me and others the freedom to serve in a government and keep things going, but to stand up for what we believe in. And I think that is quite right. And what we need to ensure in this campaign is that we're talking about the issues and the arguments, putting the facts out there so that people can make an informed choice. Not anything else. I know that other stuff is more exciting sometimes, but that is what we need to do.
Penny, do you genuinely believe that at the end of all this, at the end of all this fighting, at the end of all these attacks within the party, that it's going to be possible to put it back together after the vote?
I think so, absolutely. And even if it is a vote for leave, which I certainly hope it will be, I think that the government will do everything it can to implement that. The reason why I would trust the Prime Minister to do that is because I saw him during the Syria vote, the first Syria vote we had, which he really disagreed with the result of that. But he stuck with it. He implemented the result of that vote. He did what the people asked him to do. So we will do whatever the British people want us to do. It's important that we have this say, and I have absolute confidence in that.
Jasmine, do you think that sounds about right? Do you think it's possible to put it back together after all this?
I'm not too sure. It seems like after this whole referendum there seems to be a bit of instability within the party still, but I don't know.
Emily, next question, what have you got for us?
I think question 2 is from Glenn Gowers. Glenn, you're a student from London. What's your question for Penny Mordaunt?
Hi there. So the EU won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. I want to know how you can guarantee peace and stability in Europe in the event of Brexit.
Well, as someone that has served in the armed forces and that works in defence now, this is a really important issue to me. The worry that I have, and indeed when I served on the House of Commons Defence Select Committee and we were looking at the future threats that faced us as the UK, many of the people that came and gave evidence to us were citing the civil unrest that was occurring on the continent, the terrible human suffering that is being caused by the forced harmonisation of the Eurozone, which is causing huge unemployment, huge resentment, the lack of trust between different nations about controlling their borders and all of the security risks that come with that. What we actually need to change that and to stop the rise of far-right politics, which is a reaction to that, is giving member states of the European Union what they need to actually thrive, what they need to have strong economies, what they need, the freedoms and permissions to protect their own citizens. That's what we need, and that is what will ultimately keep us safe. Strong, thriving, peaceful nation-states that can invest in their defence and provide a strong bloc, whether it's threats from Russia, whether it's counter-terrorism, all of those challenges that we have. That's what we need. That's what peace depends on.
Is that a concern of yours, Glenn, that we wouldn't be able to guarantee peace in the event of Brexit?
I think so. I think Brexit would be the first in a domino series of countries leaving the EU, and I feel like that could affect security.
What do you make of these claims from the Remain camp about threats of World War III and things like that, Penny?
I think, well, here we go. I think that lots of those things are not believed by the public. I mean, I think what gave it away is that none of them were in the taxpayer-funded leaflet that was put out at the start of the campaign. They've made this stuff up as we've gone along. But I think there are issues around our peace and security. I know a lot of people, there are lots of threats we face, but terrorism is one that I think concerns people on a daily basis. and our security isn't dependent on a bureaucracy. If you think about what happened in the wake of the attacks in London or in Paris or in Brussels, the outpouring of solidarity that there was from European countries, the prayers that were said in our places of worship, and all the help and support that came together, that's because of our common humanity. It's not because of a bureaucracy. And I think one of the worst things that has come out of the Remain campaign is the notion that France or Germany or any of our allies would put their own citizens or ours at risk if we left the EU. Of course not. What matters to us will endure, and our security cooperation will endure.
Jim, should we go to our next question?
Yeah, we want to follow up on a similar topic. So we've got Robert Miller. Where's Robert? Robert, so you've got a question for us.
Former heads of MI5 and MI6 have both said that Brexit would hamper with our ability to protect ourselves against terrorists. Do you agree with this?
No, I don't agree with that. And indeed, we've got many other people that have worked for those organisations and the CIA who have a different view. What we know is that actually the defence structures and security structures of the EU are still open to non-member states. That's in our defence missions that we might want to participate in, but also in our security cooperation. And things like the European arrest warrant, we would still be able to use that. The government's own independent advisor has said that. All of these tools will still be at our disposal, and it's in our interest that happens, and it's also in other nations' interest that happens. So we don't lose anything, but we gain some particular things. At the moment, our ability to share intelligence with some of our key partners outside of the EU, particularly the United States, where we have a very close relationship with, is being undermined by European law. They don't want us to share data outside the European economic area. And the other gain I think we would have is that we will be able to get full control over our borders. We have some control over our borders, but we have to apply different security judgments and thresholds to people coming from outside the EU compared to those that are coming from within it. That is causing problems, and it's putting huge stress onto our security services. So I think there are some big gains by leaving.
Is there anyone else in the crowd who has a view on this in terms of the security issue and the risks of leaving the EU? Is there anyone else who wants to come in? Well, what do you think about that, Robert? Was there anything in there that you really picked up on?
Yeah, no, it was a good answer.
Fantastic. Well, that's always good to have a happy customer.
I think there's a question over here on the front row.
Where's the question? Okay, let's go to you, sir.
Seeing as you're obviously in with the armed forces and have worked with the armed forces, who would the armed forces actually swear allegiance to if we stayed within the EU? Would it be our Queen, or would it be the EU presidents?
This is a really important point, because what I've seen, I've only been in Parliament for 6 years, but what I've seen is a real desire from the public that they have, wherever possible, a say in what we're doing with our armed forces. There are always going to be situations where governments have to act quickly, rescues and hostage situations and so forth, that it's not a good idea to tell everyone about. But when we're undertaking something like our operations that we're doing in Iraq and Syria, the public, through their parliament, want that debated. They want to ensure that we're doing it for the right reasons, that we've got a long-term plan about what the end result needs to look like, and they want to know the detail. And the EU and its desire to create its own Euro army and all these other bits of state apparatus to you know, give it the baubles, if you like, of a state as opposed to what it is, a bureaucracy. The direction of travel for that is totally contrary to what the British public want. They want sovereignty. They want, particularly if we're going to put our men and women in the armed forces in harm's way, they want to know it's in British interests, and they want to know how we're going to do it, and that we're not going to be doing something reckless. So it is really important, particularly with our armed forces, that we keep control of that. If I could just add one more thing, because I think this is a really important point. There are plans to create an EU army. There's a white paper that's been produced by Germany, which is obviously going to be discussed after the referendum. We already have the EU battle group. Has anyone ever heard of the EU battle group? The EU Battle Group has been created in 2007, and what it does is it's the EU's rapid reaction force. And what happens in a crisis is that everyone gets together, and every country that contributes to the EU Battle Group has to say what it needs to deploy. And some require a UN resolution, in which case we need Russia's approval. Some require to get it through Parliament. It will require an EU Council resolution. And all of that, with all of the nations involved, takes time. How many times do you think the EU Battle Group has deployed since 2007? Think of all of the crises where we've had an interest.
Probably never.
Correct. It's never deployed. Yet it hoovers up all our resource. We've got to train for it. We've got to hold back troops to contribute to it. In this day and age, in these austere times, every ounce that we've got to spend on our security and defence should be making an operational difference, not creating a bauble for the EU.
Well, the next question was actually about an EU army. That was James Van Brett, who's right here in the second row, and I want to ask your question.
Well, you preempted my question, which is what is the evidence that the EU is planning a European army, but also what will its impact be directly on UK armed forces and also Britain's seat on the UN Security Council?
Well, there's lots of evidence, in addition to the EU Battle Group training on Salisbury Plain. There's the white paper, but many politicians and commissioners have said that that is what they intend to do. The other thing that I would say is that, because actually there are some aspects of European defence which are quite pragmatic. There are missions and procurement opportunities. They are still all open to non-member states and NATO to join in with. You know, there's some sensible stuff. But the way the EU organises ourselves means that missions that we do are very, very vulnerable. I'll give you one example. Quickly. We're involved in a mission in East Africa, a really important mission in Somalia, to ensure that Al-Shabaab doesn't become the next Daesh, to try and defeat that terrorist organisation. EU missions are uniquely vulnerable to vetoes. Vetoes are sometimes not a good thing. So all of the effort and the energy that is going in to that mission, training up local troops, is vulnerable to one nation saying, we don't want to do that anymore, and pulling the plug. It's not a coalition of nations working together who've thought that this is what they want to do. So again, what we're putting in, all the resource, the time and the training and the energy of our armed forces, there should be a payback from that, and it's uniquely vulnerable. It's not like NATO or a proper alliance.
Well, let me just interrupt you there, Penny Mordaunt, because we've got quite a lot of feedback on Facebook about that very issue, and Remy is going to take us through some of that.
Yeah, people are very excited about this point online. We've actually got 2 points, 2 questions for you, Penny. We've got James Thor, who says, why do we even need a whole army? Are they planning on invading another country or continent? And then we've got Alan Crane, who says, will there be a written guarantee in law that will ensure that our armed forces will not be dragged into the EU army that they are planning?
I think that this referendum is our chance to put the brakes on these issues and extract ourselves from having to participate in them. The problem with the EU is that you can never really trust it. It says, no, 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 we're not going to do that. But, you know, a few years on, it's exactly what we're doing. And this is our opportunity to say, no, we want to cooperate with Europe, we want to help with all of these things, but we want to do it on our own terms. So there's no guarantee, and as there's only 2 full-spectrum defence capability nations in the EU, and we're one of them. So if we're in, and there's a Euro army, there's absolutely no way we're not going to be part of it, in my view. So that we can't guarantee. And I would say this to you, our armed forces, in recent times, have done controversial things that the public has not sometimes understood or approved of. Iraq, elements in Afghanistan, and what went on there in 2006. There have been mistakes made in the past, but we've had to learn from those. And if you look at some of the operations we're doing today, Op Shader with Iraq and Syria, we're not repeating what we've done in Afghanistan and elsewhere. It's going to take a long time, but we're building capacity in local forces as we go. It's not shock and awe, but but it will last, and it will ensure that once we defeat Daesh, something else nasty doesn't pop up. So our armed forces are completely relevant as they've ever been today. They do a tremendous job, and I'm very, very proud and privileged to work with them.
OK, well, you're watching the BuzzFeed and Facebook EU Referendum Town Live with Penny Mordaunt, and we're just going to go over for our next question, which is from Melissa Chaplin, who's a PhD researcher. Melissa, what's your question?
Hi. I was wondering, how do you account for the comments you made about Turkey in light of the Prime Minister's rebuttal?
Yes. So this, for people who don't know, is the question about whether we can prevent Turkey, which is one of the accession countries, coming into the EU. And I maintain that we cannot. And there are three things you need to know as to why that is the case. The first and very obvious point is that none of us here have a veto on that, except in this referendum. That's the only chance we will have to have our say on this issue and many others. So you and I do not have a veto. We only have our say in the referendum. The next point is that this provision in the treaty that we can veto an accession country, yes, it's there, but we, the UK, cannot use it. Why? Because for many, many years, and particularly over the last few years, we have been saying to Turkey that we want it to join, and we have been making preparations for it to join. It's a key NATO ally, and to then suddenly change your policy, do a complete about turn and say no, particularly against the backdrop of the migrant crisis that we've got going on now and what the EU wants from Turkey to help resolve that. It will not happen. And that was confirmed at the weekend by John Major when he said you shouldn't worry about that because another nation, a third-party nation, he mentioned France and Germany, might veto it as well.
The thing that Melissa mentioned was the Prime Minister's comments. He described what you said as absolutely wrong and a very misleading claim.
Well,
what do you make of that?
Well, let me leave you with this final thought, OK? So the Prime Minister has committed £2 billion of our money to helping these countries come in. The European Union is committed 17 billion. You've heard the Brussels Ankara speech, but just 11 weeks ago, the Prime Minister and other European leaders agreed to accelerate Turkey's accession into the EU. Now, politicians, we are renowned for our short-term outlook. We're thinking about, beyond the next headline or the next manifesto, we're having a really good day. And what you are being asked to swallow is that we are giving huge amounts of money and telling Turkey that we are accelerating their membership, and at the same time told by the Prime Minister that it's going to come in the third millennium. That I will leave you to consider.
So, Melissa, what do you make of that? Do you think that's honest?
I think it's a good answer to a difficult question. I think that it's a very complicated issue, and there's also questions to be raised about the presentation of the migrant crisis. My PhD centres on asylum seekers and refugees, and I work with them, and I think they're wonderful people. And I think we could all do with operating with a little more compassion, actually, in general.
So is there anyone else here who feels very strongly about the idea of whether Turkey is joining the EU or whether or not Penny should be making claims about that?
There's a gentleman here who said no during that. Did you have something to say?
No, I was saying no to somebody said a politician had given a good comment.
Okay, so just generally against politicians.
That's not what BuzzFeed is.
Quite right, okay.
Can I just say why this is important? Because whether Turkey or, the veto question, that's one issue. Why it's important that we reform the free movement of people rules is because it's absolutely fine to have people travel, to move around, but you have to give nation-states two things, I think. You have to give them the ability to plan for that. You have to give them a sense of the numbers that might be involved in that. Otherwise, all sorts of things happen. But also, you have to give them the tools to protect their citizens with it's a minority of individuals, but with a security risk that comes with that. And I think the EU wants to expand, fine. There are some good reasons why expansion and Turkey coming in is potentially a good thing. But to do it and not give nation-states the tools they need to mitigate the dangers that come with that, and Turkey is in a very dangerous part of the world, very, very porous borders. That is why this is a really critical issue.
Are you not at all scared about whipping up hate or whipping up fear of the unknown by making these repeated claims about Turkey, though?
No, I'm not, because it's a concern that the public have.
That makes it valid in itself.
Well, I think unless politicians are talking about these issues, I don't want to talk about them in a hysterical way. The language I've used is exactly the same as the Home Secretary and the fears that she expressed earlier in this campaign. And I think that if we don't talk about it and we don't, as politicians, come up with pragmatic things to do to mitigate that, that's when we end up on a sticky wicket. That's when people who don't want to debate these things responsibly start to get a foothold and gain ground. So we've got to have a grown-up conversation about this. It is not a racist or radical thing to say that we want people to come here, we want migration, but we just need to control it.
Emily, what have you got for us?
Yes, on the issue of dubious claims, there is another question. Louise Penner, a bookings assistant from London. What's your question here?
My question is, why does Brexit seem to be so happy to mislead the public about the figure that we actually spend in the EU? Do you not think that we're smart enough to make up our own minds with the correct information?
How much money do you think we... This is the weekly figure.
Mm-hmm.
How much money do you think we give to the EU every
Well,
week?
you've been saying on your big red bus it is 350 million, but I think it's much less. I think it's around about 3,500 million, which is less than... Oh, I've misread that.
Don't worry about...
Completely
don't worry
messed
about
that
the
one
figure.
up.
But you would like us to talk about the net figure?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the difference, just because they're big numbers, to put it in non-monetary terms. This is the... If I use the gross figure, that's the sort of monetary equivalent, to use my own sort of language, of sending a warship a week to the EU. That's the monetary equivalent of the gross figure. The net figure is a warship a fortnight to the EU. So the point I'd make up front is it's still a lot of money. We've never said that the figure on the bus is a net figure. We've always said it's a gross figure. But the reason why I think we're right to do that is that the rebate and other things that we get from the EU, it's not like a sort of voucher that you give at the checkout. You don't know what you're getting back, and you don't know quite what it will be spent on. So we give that money over to the EU. We get some of it back in a rebate, which is calculated years after the year we've given it. We never quite know what we're going to get. We get all sorts of other bills in. The Prime Minister got a bill quite recently of 1.7 billion. He managed to knock that down to $1 billion, and that was a penalty for our economy doing well. We never quite know what you're going to get back. And the money that the EU spends on things in the UK, we can't control completely. So that's why we use the gross figure, because it's money we have no control over. But I'm quite happy to use the net figure.
But is it quite right, that £350 million figure, to have it emblazoned on a bus? Are you actually sending that money across? When you're actually getting money back, I mean, you've just seen Sarah Wollaston, Tory MP. She's actually quit your campaign over that claim itself. Is there any response to that?
Well, I think for the reasons I've just set out, why it's a legitimate figure to use. But we can talk about the net figure. My problem is that we're giving this money away, and I'm sat as a politician in the UK, having been elected to deliver particular things, and I can see how we could use that money over here much better. I think the other thing to point out is that because the Eurozone is stagnating, we are going to be asked to put more money into the pot, and particularly if other countries are coming in that don't have such developed economies, we're going to have to put even more money in.
Louise, what do you make of it? Are you convinced?
Not really, to be quite honest. It just seems a bit... I don't know, we're just getting a lot of figures, and I find it really hard to believe that you're saying, yes, it's much less. You've not actually given us a net figure. You've just said, yeah, it's not going to be 350 million, so I don't know how...
Well, the net figure is about 260 million.
Okay.
So why not put that on the
Exactly,
bus instead?
yeah. I mean, it's
Well,
a bit ridiculous.
because of the reasons I've suggested, because the difference between the net and the gross, it's still money that we can't spend as we see fit in the UK.
But you're
and we
still
don't
going around
quite know
saying
what
it's
we're
really
getting back.
high, and it's just it's not true. Like, regardless of the fact that it might not be quite the amount, but it's still a large amount of money, I agree, but it's the figure that you're going around in your big red bus is not the actual figure that we're spending when you count all the money that we're getting back.
Well, we've got a lot of reaction on this as well online. Remy, what have you got coming through?
Yeah, we've got Parkin Becker on Facebook, who I think should work for BuzzFeed, because she says, Penny, give us 5 reasons for the reason you want us to vote that way. Big kiss.
Oh, well, wherever you are. What this comes back to is sovereignty and democracy. Anything you care about, we've got a diverse audience, we've got a diverse electorate. Every single thing you care about hinges on that. It's about accountability. You elect people like me to deliver things for you. Public services, laws, all sorts of things that you care about. And if we can't hold our politicians accountable, if our laws are made elsewhere, and by the way, an institution that is financially inept, so inept it's never had its accounts signed off by its auditors in the last 2 decades, how can you possibly hold it to account? And I think that that's why we see apathy in politics. I hope we're not going to see apathy in this referendum. It sounds a dry topic, but every single thing depends on that. And ultimately, our freedom, which is about the potential of everyone in this country to reach their ambitions and their full potential, that is what freedom depends on, and freedom depends on democracy.
We actually have another question here from Stephen Whittock. He says, do you still insist that we have no veto over Turkey joining EU, as you stated 3 weeks ago, even though it was untrue then and would certainly be now, as shown in various reports at the beginning of the week?
You guys are seeing the Prime Minister later on. It's the same audience?
Same audience.
You can ask him. He said Turkey is going to be, not joining the EU until the 3rd millennium. And I think that it's going to be a lot sooner than that. And I think that unless we can reform the free movement of people rules, we are going to be unable to mitigate risk that comes with that. And ultimately, and this should be a big deal for the Prime Minister, we can't govern. Unless you can control immigration, you cannot govern. You cannot plan properly your public services. You're expecting the NHS to cope and tread water and not move forward. So that's why these issues are vital, but you can ask him when he arrives.
I mean, with that in mind, Vote Leave have put up posters saying Turkey is joining the EU. You're saying it will be a bit sooner, which is true. Is it joining, or might it join?
Well, I would go back to look at what is actually happening, as well as what politicians are saying.
Including yourself and your own campaign.
Well, yeah, we are giving the UK and the EU a huge amount of money to these accession countries. 17 billion is a lot of money. We're doing that, and we're saying this is just to help something that might be happening hundreds of years hence. It's not, in my view. It is going to happen sooner. Turkey is an incredibly important country in helping us resolve some of the issues that Europe has at the moment. And I think we need to work with Turkey to resolve those issues, but I don't think we should be in this trade-off situation. If we don't reform free movement of people and we continue expanding the EU without any reform, we are going to be in a really sorry state.
Right, we're going to have another question now. It's from Layla Thompson, who's a fundraiser. Whereabouts are you? Over there. Fantastic.
So Vote Leave have spoken a lot about being able to control our borders. In the event that Vote Leave does win, how would you propose that we control the land border with Ireland without negatively affecting what are quite delicate relationships in that region?
Yeah, I think there have been a number of really sort of tragic moments in this campaign, and I think that some of the suggestions that have been made about people's commitment to a peace process and so forth has really offended a lot of people, and I deeply regret that. I mean, before the EU came along, we've had a border. It's a hard border to police, but there have been measures put in place that work. And as the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, my colleague Theresa Villiers was saying yesterday, arrangements like that would remain. I think that, you know, we have a very close relationship with Ireland. Actually, the UK and Ireland are one of the, well, we're probably the only two countries that really play by the rules in the EU. And I think that we would make these arrangements between ourselves. There's many ways of doing it. You could have, for example, arrangements made in Dublin for people that might be flying into Ireland and then travelling.
But Penny, fundamentally, we're going to have the issue that EU citizens will still be able to go to Ireland and they'll still be right up against the UK border. And so as much as we can control one border, basically there'll be another route in.
Well, it's not just, you know, people there checking. It's about the powers that we have to prevent people from coming in. And it goes back to the point that I made to Robert earlier. At the moment, we can't apply the rules that we think are sensible and we use for the rest of the world to people coming from the EU, even if we've got real suspicions about the documents that they're carrying. We have to provide additional proofs. So we might have suspicions about someone, we might know that they're involved in a terrorist organisation or have had associations with it. But we have a further burden of proof, which we have to demonstrate that they are in a current threat, that they are potentially planning something. And it's a higher burden of proof. This was a ruling made in 2014 in a particular case known as the Z case. And what comes with leaving is the ability to take back control of those rules so that we can make the judgment about whether someone should come in or not.
Emily, what have you got for us over there?
Yep, next question is from Alison Lydon from Sheffield. Yeah, what's your question?
If the Leave campaign is successful, what will the consequences be for the hundreds and thousands of UK expats currently living and working in EU countries?
Nothing. And similarly with people who are working here, these arrangements have been put in place for a long time, and they're not contingent on the EU. Prior to the EU, we had arrangements for healthcare in place. People who have homes abroad are protected under certain protocols. So again, there's a lot of scaremongering about this. And people have thought all of these things through. I was involved in 2011 with a group of MPs, 124 MPs, in what was known as the Fresh Start project. And we looked at how the EU runs now and what we could possibly get in it and reform it. And then we looked at the things that we could do outside it. What were the risks about leaving and what were the gains? A huge amount of research, lots of field work, hundreds and hundreds of interviews with European politicians around the world, all sorts of organisations. So, and that's all online under the Fresh Start project. Anything you're worried about, whether you're a student, whether you're an expat, all of those things, whether you're worried about energy, whether you're worried about security, you can go on and you can see all the things that would protect you and why you shouldn't worry about some of the scaremongering that's going on.
Was there a specific concern that you had on expats?
I think I'd just like the option to be able to study abroad, and I didn't know whether the leaving the EU would there'd be complications with that, raise a lot of questions.
Whatever the issues are, whether it's studying, whether it's travelling, whether it's trading, what is useful for us is useful for our European partners. Why are we dependent on a bureaucracy for those things to happen? Of course they're going to endure. They're going to remain because it's good for us and it's good for the continent, especially on trade when we have a trade deficit with them. These things are going to continue. They were there before the EU, they'll be there after the EU.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim.
Yeah, Penny, thank you so much for answering so many of our BuzzFeed readers' questions today. Let's see how you did. So all the audience in the room have, due to modern technology, been given a little voting pad, and we're going to ask them if your answers have made them either happy or sad. So if the audience could start voting now, please.
While they're doing that, let's have a look at what our Facebook reaction tracker tells us about what our viewers have been thinking over the last 40 minutes. So during this broadcast, I think right now it seems to be, oh wow. So actually a lot of people have been loving what you're saying, Penny. 3,314 versus 6,292. So that's what the people watching on Facebook thought, but let's see what the reaction was in the room, Jim.
Right, so let's see what the reaction in the room was, and it's 63% like, and I think it's 36% against, because that would add up. Just about. So, Penny, what do you make of the reaction from both online and in the crowd?
Well, I think, you know, there are strong views on both sides. I think there's still a lot of people who are undecided, and it's really important events like this. So thank you for all taking part in getting the facts and the arguments out there. I would urge everyone, vote in this referendum. There is no more important decision that we have, and I really hope you have the confidence, the courage and the common sense to take back control for the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all we have time for. That's all we have time for now. In 20 minutes' time, you'll have the chance to put your questions to Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, who's backing the Remain campaign. Don't forget to hit subscribe on the BuzzFeed UK Facebook page to get a notification.
So we'll see you in about 20 minutes, but for now, a huge thank you to Penny Mordaunt.